Welcome to episode 7 of the First Customers podcast. I'm here with Daniel Johnson from We Scale Startups. He's a founding partner there, and before that, he's worked with Google, Neil Patel, and ConsenSys, among other companies, and now he's focused on helping startups grow. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Hi, excited to be here.
Thank you for making time for us today. Let's get into your background, introduce yourself to the audience a little bit. Start by telling us where you grew up.
Sure. So I grew up in South Africa in a place called Johannesburg.
Oh,
wow. And then I moved to the UK when I was quite young. And I've been living here ever since. I actually think that growing up in a different location or like having that immigrant mentality has definitely assisted in where I am today. And I'd love to talk about that, actually.
Yeah, talk about that immigrant mentality. What do you mean by that?
Sweet. So I think it's quite a nuanced term, and culturally, depending on who hears this, will have their own interpretation of what that means. But for me, It was kind of like not being afraid of change because you're used to it. Because as a young person, you sort of embrace it. And I think I don't necessarily have that experience of what it's like not to have that change. So I think as a kid, you're introduced to change, innovation. I mean, I know it sounds like a buzzword, but actually it is to an extent. You know, it's changing your location for a better life. It's innovation,
right.
And that definitely contributed to me being inspired to working with startups, and actually probably is related to sort of how I did what I do, and what I got involved in as a young person.
When you were younger, did you sell anything, or did you have any kind of early business experience, or like door-to-door fundraisers, that kind of thing?
I was that annoying kid. I was selling anything he could get his hands on to everyone at school, and it was great fun. I loved it. Sold gum, sold sweets, eventually had a couple of vending machines in my school.
Oh, wow.
At the same time, sold USB drives called Funky Flash Drives back in the day. Had an affiliate blog called trulyrandom.net.
Did you own the vending machines?
I'd lease them.
Really?
From the company that owned them.
And that was while you were in school?
Yeah, and they were at school. There were some annoying requirements, but I negotiated with the principal to try and organize that. Man, kids are awful customers because they would just shove bits and pieces down the coin rack and complain at me every single day because the prices were always too high, regardless of how high the prices were. But I mean, it was a really good way to sort of learn about financial management and planning and actually resource allocation and customer service and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And at the same time, I worked in customer service. I worked in retail, and I never want to do it again. But it was one of the best jobs I've ever had, and it's one of the most valuable jobs I had. So basically, I did all of this during school. I always wanted to be an inventor at the time. So for me, it was just coming up with new things. I love this idea that you could come up with something and then sort of turn it into a business. No one's stopping you. You know, short of what's legal and just about that pretty much. You can do mostly what you want, and I love that idea. So I was just started with sweets, and then it kind of evolved. My first proper business was called Image to Painting, which was a platform that allowed people to upload images to our website, get them professionally painted, and posted to your house. And it was a really fun story. It initially started when I was living a few houses ago, and I overheard my mum speaking to a family friend of ours. No, sorry, a family friend speaking to my mum about getting a painting of her daughter who was getting married. And although my mum works in finance most of her life, she's quite artistic and has a lot of connections. So we were trying to connect that. And I kind of butted in and I said, I have a friend at the local university who is doing fine art. How about I introduce you guys and I get a little commission? And at the time, I didn't realize what this was called, but it was product market fit. I was living with my parents in the middle of nowhere. I'd never heard that term before. But that worked really well. The artist did really well. I got a nice commission. And I said, wait, if this works well for you, do you know anyone else that might be relevant for this? And eventually it started growing. Now, at the time, I was also quite a nerd. I really like computers. I like how they worked. I like building them. I like breaking them, and break them I did. So this kind of naturally inclined me to sort of create a website because I was like, I like how stuff works. And I was slightly geeky. I'm not by any means a developer. I absolutely wish I was. It's kind of amazing how much time I've spent coding, and I'm not a developer. But anyway, I created my first website, got all that sorted, started learning SEO because I didn't have any budget for anything else. And essentially my business was growing, and I didn't really know how or why. It was almost by accident. So I started bringing.
Was it an affiliate blog, or was it an agency service?
Oh no, it was a platform. That was Image to Painting. That was.
That was okay. That was still that. Okay.
I'd been growing that over time because basically it started with that one person and scaled organically from there really well. So I developed a website, started doing SEO. Realized it wasn't enough, so I did door to door. Literally went on.
Really?
Some cheeky little kid going up to some doors, being like, "Hi, my name's Daniel. I founded this," and then we had materials and stuff. But that was a great experience. And fortunately, I was too young to have any shame or embarrassment, so I didn't care that if someone was rude to me, I was like, "Oh, how dare they be rude? Who do they think they are?" As opposed to like I'm being this annoying little kid like trying to sell my platform. But it worked well. I very quickly learned sort of how to do that, and actually that became quite profitable. Long story short, that ended up scaling, and I exited that actually to a Texas-based PE firm who actually owned one of our competitors at the time, but we did not know that. We had a really fun relationship. We had maybe I shouldn't say it. It'll make for good goss on the podcast. We had a very senior member of DHL who was an investor, an individual in our business, and as such we got very, very preferential rates. And when we ended up getting sold, I later found out that they bought us predominantly for our supply chain and our transport contracts. They just got absorbed by someone else.
A strategic acquisition for them.
But I was like 17, 18 at the time, so I didn't know. I didn't push hard enough. I didn't negotiate hard enough. Like there's a fat number on a check, and then after law fees and HMRC, the UK's IRS, it was not nearly as exciting. But still, it was.
That's incredible, though, being that young.
Well, yes.
When did you start that versus how long did it take to exit?
It took about a year.
Really?
Yeah, and I was very fortunate. And I think what really helped me is that I found people along the way that were more generous than they ever needed to be. And they just wanted to help. And it's because of their help. Like, if it wasn't for them, I absolutely would not have done that. Like, I don't want to just sound humble. I want to ensure that anyone who does listen to this understands I fell into that. I fell upwards. And I'm very fortunate for that because it gave me a lot of experiences that I've now used from other companies. But essentially, once I sold that, I was like, oh, what do I do with myself? Because I have no qualifications to my name, didn't get into university, anything exciting like that. So
you didn't get into university?
No, much to the dismay of my Indian mom. Yeah, you can imagine that. Yeah, my grades are awful. Although I kind of hold them like a badge of honor now because I don't know, in my community, there's a lot of pressure, not only to go to university, but also to study STEM, and not even at has to be Oxbridge,
right?
Kind of thing.
But did all the work you were doing on the business, I mean, surely that was recognized by the family?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I think that they're two different things. I think particularly from an Asian background, like the education culture aspect it's an emotional thing. It's a safety, security feeling as opposed to a logical decision. I think it was based on logic. But yeah, I think now that they're kind of fine with that. But it definitely was a difficult decision. Right. But for me, I learned a lot. And in fact, to get slightly off topic, it's actually quite interesting. University has been a decision that I've been thinking about a lot back in the day. And I think there's two sides to a university education that you get. One is the academic side, and the other is the social development side. And I think when you're young and you're discovering yourself, you've left home, you're exploring your boundaries, it provides a nice, safe environment to explore that in. Now, after I sold my company, I was like, oh, what do I do with myself? I ended up moving out and just sort of consulting, doing bits and pieces, starting other projects. But man, there was a lot of time I was like, I kind of wish I didn't have anyone my age. There was not a single person I knew that was my age. All my friends are like
Wow.
middle-aged couples. And I was thinking to myself, what am I doing? And this was like 4 years ago, so a while ago.
Wow.
But it was, it was jolly good fun. After image painting, what did I do? Yeah, I was kind of like, oh, this is fun. I want to do more of this. So I basically started a whole bunch of other ideas, most of which failed miserably because I didn't think about product market fit. But for me, it wasn't the marketing. I never woke up and said I want to be a marketer. I wanted to learn the most difficult skill, which was how do I get people at scale to use my product profitably? Because coming up with the idea is only like 10% of it. So essentially what I did there was like I wanted to brute force my learning. So I tried to find how can I do this for other people and just find a way. And as such, I worked in a whole bunch of different companies. In marketing roles from like tiny, small, awful companies with no product market fit up to sort of Series C, fast growing, well-funded startups. And it was at that point I was kind of like, what do I do with myself now? And at the time I had a lot of people who were sort of messaging me, asking me for work. And my ultimate goal was learning. Like, how can I learn faster? How can I develop that understanding? I want to see like the patterns between the successful companies and the non-successful companies. And over time I was starting to see that, but it was difficult to see when you're only working on one company. So I became a freelancer and I started to see the same patterns in successful companies regardless of the industry. And that was what I was looking for. And that I was like, oh, this is super cool. This is cool. And then basically what I've been doing since then is, I've started my agency, We Scale Startups, just developing and understanding that theory and understanding how businesses work and what makes people tick. And I love it. Now it makes sense to me. It's so clear. Like I've got a model in my head and it never fails. And it's really interesting once you've seen that. And it's simple but hard. That's how I kind of see it. I kind of see. I'm kind of going on my own like monologue here, so feel free to tell me to shut up. But it's interesting. What I've realized is that regardless of the industry or even B2B versus B2C, there are certain fundamental things that remain true. So the first is marketing is simply a relationship between a brand and a customer, or the process of building a relationship between a brand and a customer.
Okay.
And I think when I got into this, like after starting my company, I started learning. I'm an avid reader. I will read and do every course I can get my hands on. And it was really weird because the theory that I was learning didn't necessarily connect with my experience. And I was really confused by this. But essentially, yeah, what I learned was like, you've always got to build the foundation before you build the chimney. And that sounds so simple, but every first time founder gets that wrong. And for me, that foundation was, who is my customer? What is the problem I'm solving? How do I articulate that problem in a way that makes sense to my customer? So messaging. And one other aspect, but it's just escaped me. And like, no matter how many, sorry, it's been a long day.
No problem at all.
But yeah, and it just blows my mind the amount of like super clever, interesting people who I've explained this to, and they're like, yeah, totally get it. Let's just find a way to growth hack it. Let's just just do it.
Oh yeah,
and it's
looking
like,
for a shortcut.
And I think until you get burnt, you will never understand that. But it's so emotionally scarred in me, like so many unsuccessful campaigns, because we've tried to go forwards without that. Yeah, and that's kind of what I do. So companies come to me at We Scale Startups. We used to be fools to just marketing, but what I realized is that actually people don't care about what we do; they care about the results. And actually, what I realized is that clients now come to me, they say, we're here, we want to get to here. What does that process look like? And then I break that down and I reverse engineer it. And I say, okay, well, in order to get here, we need to get X amount of users. Well, how do we do that? What channels are involved? What does that process look like? And then you sort of deconstruct it, perform experiments, see which experiments work and see which one don't. Obviously, underneath all of this is like some very advanced stats and like lots of maths and technical stuff. But
sure,
actually, I think keeping it simple is harder than doing the technical stuff. And being able to understand like how do the technical things connect with the strategy and the big problems we're solving.
Right, especially now when it's so complicated because there's so many options. There's infinite platforms almost. At least once you get on all the platforms, there's infinite options and ways you could optimize campaigns.
And it's funny because I came, ads used to be my bread and butter, and I still love ads. I'm a big fan of them, and I think when they're used correctly, they're effective. But what I realized, I think this was in like 2019, and like intellectually I understood it, but I realized that each channel is just a tool in your toolbox, and it's all about what is the appropriate tool for this situation. And when I kind of understood that, it really helped me. It also helped me with strategy a lot, because I realized I was trying to push certain channels that weren't not appropriate, but may not have been the best channel. And I was like, okay, how do I use this tool to achieve this goal, as opposed to what is the best tool to achieve this goal, which actually just made life a lot easier, because then I was actually using tools and channels more effectively and thinking about the user journey. Yeah, I don't really think about it tool based anymore. I just think about what are the steps that a customer needs to go through to become an active and loyal, engaged user of your brand or service, from where they are now, which might be never heard of you.
Could you give an example of maybe a kind of average customer journey?
Sure. So, I mean, I quite like using Parrot metrics, which is just a variation of segmentation, which goes awareness, acquisition, activation, retention, referral. But a lot of my clients may not necessarily know this process. So what I say to them is kind of like, unfortunately, I wish most people would wake up and they would think of, the first thing they would do is, I want to buy your product, one of my clients' products, a piece of jewelry from Rock and Roll, for example. Unfortunately, they don't wake up with that. What they do is they wake up with a problem, or that they want to get solved. We all have just problems in our life which we want to get solved. And what they do then is they think to themselves, the first stage is actually figuring out, do they have a problem? And then it's defining the problem. So it's actually understanding where that problem comes from and what that problem is in their life. So they position it in how impactful is this problem. Once they've done that, they start investigating how to solve the problem. So this might sound like we're breaking down into micro segments, but actually before we make any conscious decision, there's a lot of micro decisions that we're making. And this problem might be, how do I get fitter? It might be, how do I improve my relationships? It might be, what do I eat for dinner that night? That almost doesn't matter. It's more about what are the steps that we take. So defining the problem, researching the problem, identifying solutions to that problem. So that might be, if I'm hungry, that might be Uber Eats, that might be Wagamama's, which is a restaurant over here, that might be making my own food, or a smoothie, So it's not just you and your competitors, it's everything that might solve your customer's problem that you do. And by understanding that process and that user journey, we can understand the emotions and challenges that our customer faces. And by understanding that, we can more effectively solve their problem and talk to them. And I think that makes, when we think about it that way, like, I love doing what I do. I think there's a lot of taboo on marketing, but actually what I've realized is that all I'm doing is helping people solve problems. The more accurately I can help people solve those problems, the more money I make, the more successful my clients, the happier everyone is. And so when we see spam, obviously it does work. Otherwise, people wouldn't spend millions on ESPs that generate it. But on the whole, like, the more efficiently I can understand my customer, the better I can. People don't hate ads; they hate untargeted ads. If we had some sort of Elon Musk's chip in our brain that was saying exactly every problem we had, using all the information we had, it would be fantastic. It would solve our problems before we figure it out. Kind of reminds me of that story about that lady who went to Walmart, and based on her buying patterns, it congratulated her on a new baby that neither she nor her dad, who was with her, knew at the time. Now, perhaps that's a bit invasive, but to a certain extent, if we had a robot that could answer all our questions and solve all our problems for us, we would pay for that. Sure. So the better you understand your customer, the more efficient everything is. Yeah.
So it's like spam is just marketing or advertising you see for a problem you don't have.
Yeah. I like how you articulated that. I often think about it like newsletters. When talking to my clients, I'm a big fan of email. Email works really well if done properly. And I say to them, imagine I send you 1,000 emails a day. How would you feel? And immediately they're like, no, I don't want that. That's not great. And then I'm like, okay, imagine it at $1,000. So every time you open that email, you receive $1,000 into your bank account, instant, no catch, no fee, no worries. And they'll be like, yeah, I'd open a few emails. Be like, it's not spam anymore. It's quite exciting to open.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, it'd be a bit expensive if we sent every one of our customers $1,000 every time we ever send them an email. But what we can do is we can find a common ground. We can find some form of value that adds to their life. I mean, that's a bit specific to sort of email, but I think in general, it's all about solving problems and figuring out how to do that. And actually, when you think about it from that perspective, it becomes a lot easier. I think it's very easy to get lost in the weeds and in the detail.
For sure. I love that. I think that's a great perspective on marketing, focusing it on solving problems, and because that'll help you at every step of the marketing funnel. Take us back to starting this current business that you have now, your agency, and those very first customers that you brought in. How did you find them or network with them? Go into a little bit about that, of how you got those very first or the first customer.
So I'd say 90% of our customers are referrals. At the beginning, I didn't know anything, and I was just constantly asking questions from anyone who would listen, anyone who would share some advice. And as a result of that, a lot of them were Slack groups and WhatsApp groups. And
Okay.
I would say for like 5 years, I asked a hell of a lot of questions until people would just get annoyed at me.
And
then
what kind of groups were they? Like, there were Slack groups, but
startup,
okay.
marketing, innovation, so anywhere around those kind of areas, and also
Okay.
some like more specific product management, fundraising, stuff like that. And I think as I started learning more, I switched to answering more than I asked, to try and so many people had gone out of their way to just give me advice, and they received nothing from it. And I was really appreciative and grateful for that. So what I wanted to try and do is like, how can I give that back? So I started answering a lot of questions, and I became very active. I liked the sound of my own voice, even in text, and I enjoyed that, and it was just really fun. And I became sort of, people started tagging me and expecting, what's the phrase I'm looking for? I was the domain expert unofficially on a bunch of different topics.
Okay.
And then people started saying, hey, Daniel, do you know anyone that can do X? And I'll be like, here I am.
Yeah.
And now it's basically just WhatsApps from old clients to new clients. So like I get forwarded these emails saying, hey, do you know anyone that can help with this? And then they just intro me. And I really like that. I really like the fact that, most of my clients are super warm leads from existing or old customers that were really happy with me, because it means the closing the deal is just having a conversation more than anything else.
Right.
But it's not predictable, it's not scalable, and it's not necessarily repeatable, which is the biggest concern that we have as an agency, because it's great having this, and so far it's done pretty well even through COVID. But it's not predictable, and at the end of the day, that's not feasible. So we do also, and increasingly have been investing in a bunch of other things. So we do use some platforms. We find some mild engagement with those platforms. Marketer Hire, A-Team, Maypal, like all these various sort of freelance platforms. They can be quite useful. I do just interact in a bunch of other Slack groups, and I find that general conversation either gets me a lot of brand awareness. It's funny. I think like the establishing the basics do 50% of it. So having a strong think about where do I position myself, what is the main problems that I solve, and then developing brand assets. So I have my website, which is danieljohnson.xyz, agency website, my LinkedIn, and I thought about where do I want to position myself, and then I promoted myself on these different websites, and I made sure that my LinkedIn and everything was shit hot. And I get a lot of cold leads or sort of normal leads through those platforms. Even just people on my LinkedIn who message me saying, I really loved your LinkedIn. And it's not hard. Like, I don't know. I think we're always trying to think strategically about like, what's a cool technique we can use to have an asymmetric, massive impact. But actually, if we think about it, like, let's get the basics done first. Let's make sure they're sorted. And yeah, and like having that sorted solves so many problems already. And then once you've got that, you can start thinking about what are the next layer. Um, yeah, I also think that one of the biggest issues is being a generalist, both as a freelancer, as a marketing agency, and for all my customers. The smaller that, like, the more specific the group your customers, the more effective your campaigns. Kind of like full stop. It's pretty broad like that.
So what do you mean by that? The smaller, like the target audience that you're going
Yes.
after? Okay.
Yeah. So the smallest possible market, start with the smallest possible market, and then dominate them and expand from there. And
Okay.
I think a lot of people intellectually understand this, but they struggle to do that because no one wants to miss out.
Right. And I know that in some ways the platforms have made it harder to focus on smaller groups. Like back in the day, you could upload one email address to Facebook and send an ad to your friend at work, basically. Like it was super targeted, but now, you have to have at least 1,000 email addresses just so it's more anonymous,
And then also like the email addresses you have and collate. I mean, you get California law and GDPR here, but personal email versus work email. So how do you target people? What emails do people give you? All that kind of stuff. But also, like, this comes. It's funny. There was this. I think it was Google when you could target people down to the person. There was a story I read about some engineer targeting his housemate, saying, "We're watching you," on all his ads with like a maximum frequency, just targeting this one person. Later on, someone used something similar to target an employer and say, "You should hire me as a digital marketer." And I thought that's a really clever idea.
Yep.
So 1,000 is the minimum at the moment, and for most of our customers, that's not really an issue. And most people will provide the email if they feel it's justified, if they feel they're going to get something from it and they trust you. So it's not too much of the issue. Kind of just depends on who your customer is and kind of what the problem is that you're solving for them.
Do you remember what the very first person, like from the forums or the Slack groups that you were involved with, like what the first job was that you agreed to do for somebody? Like
Facebook ad, I think.
Okay.
It went terribly. Like that went awfully. I think I had a lot to learn then. When you're working in a company adding value, that's a very, very different compared to a consultant or a freelance adding value compared to an agency. So when you're working in a company, it's mostly about the value that you provide, and it's quite quantifiable. When you become a consultant, it's halfway between there. So it's not just about the value you provide, but it's about the value that your clients perceive you to have provided. So I'll go into that in a bit more detail. And then as an agency, people hire you not just to produce the results, but for a sense of safety and trust. They hire you so that when they sign that check, they don't have to worry about their marketing anymore. There's a nice, warm, comfortable marketing blanket over their shoulders.
Yeah.
And that was probably the biggest challenge that I had. So going back to the first customer, I won't name names, but I keep coming across their brand occasionally. And long story short, they wanted the world for nothing. As every successful CEO of any startup wants, because, I think to be a successful startup, you need to be hungry and you need to be impatient. I think there are certain limits though. Anyway, so we're working with this person. We're trying to develop some ads. And the whole thing just became a bit of a mess. What I realized is that, there's a few areas. And one is the client's expectations based compared to their compensation were just completely irrational. And I didn't have enough experience to understand that. The client's expectations in general were just irrational, excluding the compensation, which was just, I can't believe I took that now thinking about it, but c'est la vie. And most of it came from the basics, like just me poorly communicating with the client, me not structuring the client. The client was hiring me to do the job, so I should have told them what I was going to do as opposed to just ask them as much. But I learned a lot from that. But man, I remember how stressed I was in my friend's living room asking for advice, and I was like, man, what am I going to do? Like, why is this client so frustrated? And Oh man, if only I knew.
Yeah. But that was before you'd really built out an agency or processes or anything. That was like, it was
Yeah,
almost more like
any
a
sort of
freelance
infrastructure. Yeah,
job
it was.
almost.
It was. But like, even nowadays, like I was talking to my team earlier, and I get frustrated at the amount of meeting notes we have to take and logistical admin stuff we do. But
Yeah.
actually, we got to do that stuff in order to produce the results. And you're always
Right.
spinning lots of plates. And like when you're working for a big company, when you're a marketing agency for a big company, there's very little emotion involved. You don't really care about the success or failure of the company, particularly if it's a PLC or something. But when you're a startup, it's a vehicle for someone's passion or mission or some problem that they want to solve in the world. And I take that quite seriously because I think that's it's often a person's personal money, or like it's yeah, it's very important to that person, and I respect that. I do also think most people don't say to their accountant, "Oh, I don't like how you've modeled this." They don't say to their developers, "You can clean this code up a little bit." But they always go to the marketer and say, I don't click on
Right.
ads," or "I don't like that shade of blue," or something
Yep.
along those lines. And I always encourage people to share feedback because actually some of the best ideas come from the weirdest places. But it's also there is process and structure behind everything we do. There has to be because I'm not a creative genius as much as I wish I was.
Right.
Um, Years
And
ago,
it's
my
hard to
sister
be
came.
a genius at scale anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Organized genius is a lot easier. It's funny
Right.
because when I told people I run a marketing agency, or now I call it a growth agency. There's this image of like Mad Men, with a fat cigar in
Yeah.
one hand and a glass of scotch in the other, and it's just coming up with these genius ideas, and like I wish that was the case. It's spreadsheets.
I was about
My
to say the
my
same
maths
thing.
understanding has like really improved. It's just
Yep.
looking at data, coming up with ideas, testing it out, seeing what works, and then scaling that. Um, so I'm good with the systems. I'm not necessarily good with like just coming up with ideas. But it's interesting. I recently found out after an audit today that my most successful creative across industry is memes, which is
Really.
really interesting.
Hmm.
And that
And
was
those are
across
way more casual, lower production value. Whereas traditionally you'd think, hey, we spent, ten to $100,000 on this video production, highly produced commercial, but you throw that on social media and everybody scrolls past it.
there's three types of creative we always recommend with like when you're getting started, particularly if you're just new. One is like a 30-second TikTok style face to camera from founder perspective of their mission. So who they are, why they created their company, what's important to them. Really energetic, some fairly nice lighting, make it organic, that kind of thing. Uh, Another is testimonial. Video testimonials perform really well.
Hmm.
Um, and the other one is actually an animated 30-second graphic. They perform pretty well cross industry, particularly for more complicated products. Um, but I love the fact that this organic content works really well.
Yeah.
The memes were a random idea for a game. I was working for a pretty successful horror game. Um, I'm not going to mention the brand.
Okay.
I don't think.
That's fine.
Um, NDAs, man, startups and NDAs. They love their NDAs. I hate it. I hate them. But anyway, we had some great creative, like super fancy video produced at like super high end agencies, and it was doing pretty well. We had an okay CPA. It was a very competitive industry, and I was literally on the tube. I was living in Taipei at the time, and I was on the underground public transport, and I realized I used three colloquialisms to describe the train line underground, and I was like, wait, Americans might not get that. Um, and I was literally just playing with this editor on my new phone, and I created this silly little meme. And I was like, oh, let me just give it a go. Let me just try 2% of the total daily budget. See what kind of engagement this gets, and then if it's absolutely awful, I'll ignore it. If it mildly works, then I will produce something better. And we doubled that. I can't remember the number, but I remember that the CTR of that was hot. It was more than double any other creative we'd ever performed for that.
Wow.
And then I started looking at all our other campaigns and trying to figure out what was going on there. And regardless if it's B2C or B2B, we found memes improve performance. And then what really improves performance is actually identifying, because a meme, well, even the definition of a meme is a method to communicate cultural knowledge. So memes are subjective because modern day memes are humorous, and like what makes me laugh is very different from what makes you laugh,
Right.
both culturally and experience. So I was nervous that we were going to produce something that would just fall flat on its face, and it would feel very like down with the kids. I don't know if you've seen that scene with Steve Buscemi out of some film where he's pretending to be a high school student.
Yeah. He said, "Hello,
Um,
kids," something like that.
yeah, hello, fellow kids, or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that worked really well.
Wow.
And that was literally just me like being bored and trying to come up with creative stuff.
Just a
But
pure
I think
experiment.
I think it really goes from like, I tried with a lot of my clients, I tried to have somewhere between 10 to 20% of the budget on experimentation based campaigns at any time, just to try and figure that one out.
Awesome. Yeah, that's funny how many similarities, just through the years of experience working at the agency I work with, and we found the same thing. It's always good to have a little percentage to experiment with, try things out, because you never know. No matter how many times you think, well, all right, we got it figured out, we know exactly what we're doing and what works, and then you try something that works better than anything you've ever done, and it's like, okay, well, maybe we don't know what we're doing, because you can't predict it. At least you can't predict which creative is going to perform the best, it seems.
And I still, I don't know, like I look at ads and I look at, stuff, and I'm like, oh, this is a terrible idea. Why would they do that? And then performs really well, great CPA. And it's like, well, I'm an idiot.
Yep.
I went on a website recently and I was looking and I was like, this isn't going to convert well. It's not a great layout, doesn't follow best practice. And I found out that it was it's an affiliate blog comparing household goods, and it's like one of the top 3 in Europe. It's just like, I don't know. I don't know anything. Like,
Yeah.
it blows my mind. I mean, even some of the ads. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead and finish up.
Even a lot of the ads that I expected to perform differently or perform well. Like, I've seen literally tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of ads now that I've like paid attention to. So to a certain degree, I'm pretty good at like judging whether or not it's going to work. But I do have my personal preferences, and what this is really defined is how personal those preferences are and how it does not represent other people. And
Right.
just because I believe this to be true, I expected other people to as well, because we assume the world has the same.
Yep.
Everyone approaches the world the same way that we do, unless we are challenged in that. And that was kind of like a really sort of interesting learning.
Yeah, I think you can experience that, and I think that's one of the most fascinating parts of the internet is you go down some random silo on some trending topic on Twitter or something like that, and you realize there's a whole group of people passionate about something that you had no idea even existed, or they have totally opposite opinion of you on something you thought was just common sense, and there's a whole debate about the issue. Could you talk more about what you said earlier about there's one thing, it's one thing to get results for a client, but then the perception of value from the results, or that perception of results, is a different issue. And I've seen the same thing with clients. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you display the value or communicate that value to the clients?
So, when I was working in companies, I had to do presentations and stuff, but I never really thought about it in too much. I love your mug there. That's motivated me. It's like 9:30 in the evening, and I'm like, no, I want to work now. But on the whole, it's like, here's how many customers we have, or leads, or whatever, depending on the client. And then when you become a freelancer and you're starting to consult for clients, what happens is, and I didn't know this, and it's not just about the numbers. You can't just send them numbers and expect them to be happy. You have to then sort of put yourself in their shoes and think to yourself from like first principles. Why are they hiring you? And it took me a long time to figure this one out. But what I realized is that on a very practical level, they want us to create campaigns to generate results for their business so that they can get customers and make more money.
Right.
But how we do that, there's so many layers of it. It's not just about actually being able to be technically proficient and good at your work. That's just one aspect of it, one small aspect of it. I would say, and I was speaking to a new hire recently, and I was saying, probably communication and critical thinking are the two most important things. So communication it's so much more than what I expected it to be. It's not just me being able to communicate with you. It's how effectively do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, how well do you understand the words that I'm saying compared to the message that I'm trying to communicate from within my head? Sorry, it's been a long day. Words are failing me, but essentially what I realized is that, so for example, what we do a lot is we don't just produce the campaigns and show them results. We handhold them. We make them feel comfortable. We develop a relationship with them. We understand what is the mission of their company. What is the Simon Sinek why of why they created their business? What's important to them? All of these kind of things. Because although they're sort of minute, when someone hires you, and I don't think a lot of the customers know this even, they're really hiring you to take that stress off their shoulders, that fear of the unknown. They're hiring you for the process that you have. And all of that, not just the results, is important. So, we have weekly meetings with our clients. We create lots of pretty decks. We over communicate. We solve problems. We talk in narratives. All of those things combined help to build that relationship and help to not only produce the results, but produce that safety blanket. And this is something that I didn't realize until I started working with an American guy called Matt, who I really respect and I've always admired. And he was a freelancer, but what he did really well is he consulted. He was an excellent consultant. And when I saw how he did that and how he thought about the questions and the challenges that his customers are going to have before they ask him, and he produced decks and information and he solved those problems. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. It's not just, here's the results, thank you. It's what is the problems that our customers have and how do we solve that? Because it's not just about like how many leads we get, how many customers our customers get. It's more than that. It's about the growth of the business. It's about the mission. It's about the feeling of trust and safety and understanding the future and all of this. Almost a bit like a cross between a therapist, an agony aunt, and a consultant. And I think that's particularly important because we're working with founders who, and these founders are often, they don't care about the fact that it's a company. They care about the mission that they're trying to achieve. And it's their baby, and you've been entrusted with their baby. So you've got to act like it and be respectful and all those kind of things. So,
what do you mean by speaking in narratives?
So this is something that I learned. It's really interesting. I've learned so much stuff just by talking to my team and sort of explaining the why behind it and making myself think about that. So narratives help to provide context. And one of the issues I had as a before I started probably thinking about consulting aspects of it was giving clients information without enough context or giving people information without enough context. Our job is to make our clients feel completely comfortable. So ideally, they don't ask any questions of us. And I mean that on a practical level because we answer all of them. So when we start a conversation with them, say a weekly update, we start at the beginning. Here's what we want to achieve, or here's the goal that we want to achieve. And we walk them through that process. So whether that's the slides of having a beginning, a middle, and an end, thinking about all the potential obstacles before they become a problem, and just making sure that we always have that flow as we're speaking to people. I didn't feel like I articulated myself very well there.
Okay. So you're kind of thinking ahead, making sure you're solving any potential problems that could come up. And I guess I was trying to see how that connected to the word narrative. That makes me feel like you're telling some kind of story, or you're kind of piecing together what you're doing on the project into some kind of overall story. Yes,
I like the way that you said that, actually. Okay. I'm impressed you managed to get that from what I was trying to say. But essentially, it's that. We've got lots of different pieces of information, and actually our clients don't care about a specific piece of information. They care about a goal being achieved. And what we do is we piece those different bits of information and we put them together in a specific order and we try and figure out how does this information, like where does this information fit in the problem we're trying to solve. What do we need to know first? What do we need to know second? Like, what are the blockers that are going to stop us from doing this? I think it's kind of like a mindset of communicating and a way of thinking that helps to ensure whenever we're speaking to a customer, everything is contextualized and makes sense and is not siloed in terms of context. Yeah, I feel like a broken record now, just sort of repeats myself. let me come on to that. I'm gonna have a think.
Yeah. So it sounds like, a lot of times you're asking for like access to a Facebook business manager account or some really technical thing, and maybe you're emphasizing like, how does that relate, that one request or that one task you guys need to do? How does it relate to the bigger picture of what you're trying to accomplish for them, and always looping back to the overall goal of a project, and instead of just having a bunch of random asks for the client?
I mean, that's a very good example of what I'm trying to communicate.
Okay.
If this was a normal meeting, I'd be like, let me have a think about it and let me like email you something later. But as we're recording, it's difficult.
Right.
I wish I could find the words, because actually, like, I became quite sort of, a lot of our clients don't really care about like how we do it, and they don't care about sort of the approach. And sometimes I'm like, oh, that's how dare they? Like, I worked so hard for this. But I realize like they don't work, they're not hiring you for your approach, they're hiring you for the results. And
Right.
for a lot of them, like, they didn't choose to go into marketing, and they're not there for a reason. So like I shouldn't take it personally in any respect about that.
Right. Yeah, because they'd love it if you just handled it for them completely and they didn't have to think about how it's made or how it's done. They just want to wake
Honestly,
up to
that,
sales
like,
or
if
leads.
depending on our clients, we do have some people like that, where as long as our numbers are consistent and good, they don't care. I think when clients start micromanaging you, they do it out of fear. They do it out of, I don't know what's going on. There's not enough communication. I'm scared about the future, so I feel the need to have to take control. And as soon as that happens, it's because we're not communicating ourselves effectively enough. And I think that's really important. Just taking extreme ownership, always massively over communicating, making sure you understand. Like, actually, this goes through both managing clients and also all marketing campaigns. People are not logical. They do not buy based on logic, including myself, and I thought I was. People buy based on emotion and then justify it using logic. And I did not realize this until, well, I mean, like, I knew it, but I didn't really know it. And it's fascinating. Whenever we look at like emotion-based campaigns, whether it's memes, and I think memes work really well because it incites an emotion that isn't usually connected to advertising, which is humor. And particularly if that resonates really well from a brand, then that has a strong personalization and high chance of converting. But on the other side of that, we worked with a very boring, because I'm going to call them boring, I'm not going to mention them. It's a CRM platform, one of the big ones, kind of designed for like corporates. And it was really boring creating creative for them, because very strict guidelines, very like, this is what they did. And we ended up creating a campaign, trying to figure out how vague we can be without being like personally identifiable. But we essentially created this campaign that focused on getting home to see your kids sooner. So essentially the logic was, the CRM will improve your day, improve your efficiency, make you not stressed, and help you live, like, be a better family man. That was essentially the goal. And that worked really well. We didn't talk about the CRM. We didn't talk about the anything, integrations, APIs, nothing.
Just how it would change their life in a meaningful, emotional way.
Yeah. And yeah, 99% of the time, the things that have that impact are that change in state. People buy because of that perceived change in state. Yeah, it's funny because marketing is really, like, I know we talked about it being the process of developing a relationship between brand and customer, but it's also a process of getting people to take an action. Because everyone who reads one of our ads, we want them to see, we want them to do something, whether that's something small like clicking onto the next page, visiting a website, or buying a product, whatever it might need to be. And in the same way, our clients come to us and they say, we're here, we want to get to here. I think to myself, okay, from our customers' perspective, where are they now, and where do we want them to be? What do we need that to happen? So and nothing I'm doing is like, being conniving or like going behind my customer's back. All I'm trying to do is actually define them more effectively, target them. It's so convoluted, the terminology nowadays. Yeah, and I think like if more people sort of approach it from that strategy first, where it's like, oh, it's not actually that it is complicated, but the basis of it, the foundations are actually quite simple. Solve problems that people want to be solved, figure out who they are, how they talk about those problems. One of the most common issues that I see, and I've been monologuing this tons, so my apologies. Feel free to interrupt. Is messaging. So I'm super dyslexic. I'm really dyspraxic. I'm actually, well, now I'm good at writing copy because I've brute forced myself to like write books and stuff. I hate it. But actually, message market fit is probably the most common issue that I see, because ages ago I was working for a SaaS platform, and I would go for pints with my customers as regularly as I could, because I found that seeing my customers face to face allowed for a certain level of like communication and learning about my customer that wasn't necessarily achievable via a survey or phone call. So I'd go for beers with them, and I would chat to them, and I'd ask them a series of questions. I had like 6 questions I always asked them, and then I would ask them more depending on what it was. And actually getting them to have a beer really helped them loosen up. Not exactly the most scientific thing when you're at a pub, but it worked pretty well. And I remember I asked one guy after like 3 pints, how would you describe our product to your friend who worked in the same industry? And he said something else. A long time ago. He said e-commerce in a line of code, or shop in a line of code. What was really interesting is that at the time I was working in a company, and everyone there was a developer apart from me. So everyone's like, fastest JavaScript, super clean, super clear, super sexy code. And I was like, cool, assuming that was our customer. And I was chatting to this guy, realized he didn't care about how fast the code was. What he liked about it is that he could copy and paste the product into his blog. That was the thing that adds value to him. And I stumbled back to my WeWork and updated my experimentation campaign, just trying to see if that would work out. And I came back to the office the next day with significantly improved results. And what I realized is that, again, we were focusing on the wrong things. And actually, like, being able to use the words that your customers use to talk about the problem that they have, like, it affects everything. So it's just so important.
Have you used any tools like Vox Verba? And full disclosure, I invested in this company called Vox Verba, but it literally does what you're saying about it takes customer feedback and customer reviews and then outputs like brand messaging and different, like a brand persona and that kind of thing. Or do you use any other AI tools like that?
So it's interesting you say that. Oh, my voice broke. We do it mostly manually. We have frameworks and systems that we use. I have been using ChatGPT to not just for content generation, because ChatGPT is really interesting. I think it's fantastic. I don't think it's very clever, but I think if you think about prompts really well. So one thing that we're exploring with a e-commerce brand that we're working with is using it to analyze data. Now, I have no idea. I need to analyze the results of what we're doing to try and see how effective it is. But if it works 1/10 as effectively as I think it is, it's amazing. One of the most interesting aspects that it's working on is data processing and analysis. So we have some form of data, we give it to it, we get it to process that data, and then we ask questions about it. And its insights are really fascinating. Like, for example, today, we had a survey data come in to us, and we stuck it into the system, and we asked it, give us the demographics and psychographics of people. I mean, it was a bit more advanced than that, but it was really interesting, and it spat out like a bunch of different personas that were really valuable. Now, I need to actually see, do those personas generate results? Like, do they will it make us more money, or is it just a language model sort of saying, I think this is what you want to hear? I don't know. Vox Verbis sounds really cool. I'm like genuinely #not sponsored going to check that out, because if
Yeah.
anything that can help me, and actually I think everything's going to move that way. Like in the same way that we've got Google. God, I run these ads literally every day where I'm at Google Performance Max campaigns, and then you've got Meta Advantage Plus campaigns, where you're getting increasingly less ability to make changes, and all of it's being automated and AI based and A/B tested or multivariate tested, and that's how I see the future, because I think one day, like, there's so much data out there. If we think about like a full HubSpot setup with some B2B company, like they've got CRM data, they've got email data, they've got website interactions, they've got like the level of understanding that we can see of how people view websites, for example. Like if the average person knew I can follow their cursor, that would be pretty creepy. But you put all of that data, because what we do, and this is probably getting a bit too technical, but for a lot of our customers, we when we start working with them, we standardize all the data, we stick it into BigQuery, and then we create Data Studio dashboards or something. And we like that because we've generally got multiple sources of data, and this standardizes it. But I was thinking about, like, we've got all this data, let's stick it into one thing, and why can't we use, why can't we use an AI to somehow say, looking at all of this, we see that this creative responds really well, this messaging responds really well. Like doing what I'm doing and manually or automatically identifying the patterns.
Yeah, it seems inevitable that because all the parts are there, and it just has to be put into a package to where all of it gets processed and output in a way that marketers can use it. And I'm guessing that's a lot of what the AIs, like the Performance Max Advantage Plus campaigns, that's what they're doing in the black box, that they don't really reveal is, you can upload lots of different images and headlines to test, and it'll just churn through tons of impressions and figure out what the best performer is. But yeah, there's more data available that could be utilized, especially now with these language learning models that can help you just produce the content and it run its own experiments eventually, by testing its own headlines. If it has a certain set of maybe a brand persona plus product plus whatever your goals are, and it could kind of automatically go through its own experiments eventually, which is kind of crazy. You think that it will replace marketers eventually?
Yeah.
Really?
It's kind of funny. I think it will replace marketers and move them into other positions.
Okay.
I think there's a certain level of, like I mentioned earlier, our job is to get people to take action. And I think that's very difficult to quantify just yet. I think at the end of the day, we are like biomechanical machines, and we are calculatable by a powerful enough computer, but not yet. I think there's a lot of slow, boring data analysis that humans do naturally because of how our brain works, and essentially have like tens of thousands of processes. And I think a lot of the data work will disappear, but I still think the strategy and certain insights will be difficult to ascertain from numbers alone. I think certain elements of creativity, but I think it'll be augmented, it'll be supported by. I think it's difficult to predict the future because we don't know what we don't know. When looms, like super old school looms that would weave clothes came about, there was like anger, and weavers were like, excuse me, what do you call this machinery? Like, how are you going to get your clothes if we don't do it? And obviously they did other things. And
right.
Usually I mean, my personal opinions are probably a bit too extreme for this conversation, but usually I'm like, power to the people, what can we do? But I do think that this tooling and this technology are, again, just tools to help us do it. And it's about how we use it that's going to make it successful or not. And if we don't use it well, then we're going to mess up. And if we use it fantastically, then excellent. But it all goes down to how well do I understand my customer and the problems that they're facing. Like that's the fundamentals.
So going back to what you said at the beginning, the concepts are simple, but the execution is hard. If you tactically try to do everything it takes to get results for clients, or, evolve as an agency in this modern world that's changing every day with all these different things. Like that's the hard part, even though the basic principles are simple because you're just dealing with people and convincing them to buy something, submit information or whatever. So the basic interaction is the same. It's just really different day to day how we go about accomplishing that as marketers. Would you launch differently if you had to launch today? Launching your agency, what would you do differently?
Well, we never officially launched. We just kind of slowly grew. Kind of, I don't know, like mentally pitching like a bag in the ocean, just sort of floating along. I don't think I would do anything differently at the beginning. I know one of the big issues we currently have is focus. We focus on app SaaS, e-com, and crypto, which is a very broad range, too much. And if we look at our customers, we've had massive enterprise companies. We've had P&G, we've had Google. We've also had tons of startups in all sorts of ranges, from e-com to adult toys to fintech to how do you identify what that is? And the fundamentals are all the same. It's like, who's my customer? What is the problem I'm solving for them? It's funny. For image to painting, one of our fastest growing market segments at the end was we partnered with a franchise in the UK that did family photos. But what they also did was like erotic photography. So basically,
oh wow,
if you fancied a gift for your partner, or your partner wants.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But it was mostly just like middle-aged parents who wanted a bit of fire back in their relationship.
Things up a little bit.
And then, long story short, they could get a painting of that, and we would take a commission through our agency. And I remember being sat with an iPad, and my job was to focus on the is there enough contrast and color so the painters can do this. And here I am sat with my parents at it's just like, wait, does the contrast of the skin work? My dad looks at me and he's like, Daniel, if you want to do that, you can do that in your own time.
Like, what kind of business are you running now?
That's my clients. I think it what I'm thinking is the focus on like, who's your customer? What is the smallest possible market you can dominate? Because I think that the biggest issue I see is people doing trying to boil the ocean kind of thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Including myself.
Yeah. Definitely been there. All right. You got time for a few rapid fire questions?
Sure.
All right. So let's start off by going through some traditional marketing tactics. So we're just going to go over basically different marketing funnel, sales funnel tactics, and just see if you use any of those or have used any of those for your current business.
Sure.
All right. So traditional marketing first. Are you using direct marketing tactics like face-to-face meetings?
Increasingly less so.
Okay. Telemarketing or cold calls?
I'm a huge fan when worked correctly. In fact, I had an hour-long call. I'm doing a session tomorrow about cold calling. I think particularly in the UK, we really struggle with that because of our like cultural fear of speaking to other people. But actually, like, it's one of the best performing and most underrated channels that I believe. And I think if you're polite, like the amount of times where I phoned someone's like, "Hi, my name's Daniel. This is a sales call, and I completely appreciate it if you don't want to chat right now. You give me 30 seconds of your time, and I can explain myself. You can then, you're more than welcome to say, go away." And I think maybe British culture dictates that after you've started a conversation, it's rude to stop it. So maybe that's part of it. But like, very few people are rude or not nice. And again, if you're solving a real problem, then people don't generally mind. It's also quite a fun challenge to get through the gatekeeper.
Yeah, and that's a nice, polite intro you had there in that example. What about? Yeah, for real. What about direct mail, snail mail, like sending literal physical mail to people?
Before COVID, this worked really, really well. That we, particularly with tech companies, we found that it was really impossible to actually outbid some of the brand's competitors. I was working with a company that was competing against Shopify. They can't spend $20 a click for have a CPA of $1,000. So what we did there is actually I started handwriting letters or like
Wow.
notes, A5 notes. My handwriting awful, it's absolutely awful. And I wrote 100 of these, and I sent them out to our customers to see what kind of engagement we got. And either people chose them or took a picture of them and stuck them on social. And it worked really, really well. And very long story short, we ended up developing this whole system where we would scrape some data and then identify their industry and then send it out. And there was a service where they would send postcards, handwritten postcards by API if we gave them the data. And that combined with omni-channel focus worked really, really well for that client. So that worked really well. After COVID, I'm finding that a lot of people are working remotely and not at their office, and it's just not as effective.
Okay, so you would send it to the business before, and now you don't have the personal address, or
and it goes against GDPR to contact them.
Gotcha. I see. Okay.
Unless the business address is their home address.
Gotcha. I didn't know that. Need to stop spamming people. No, I'm not doing that. Okay. Different forms of print media like newspaper ads.
I've done them a bunch of times. I've yet to see any good results with them. I want to be wrong, but yeah.
What about magazine ads?
No, okay. I've tried that a lot as well.
This is a little really old school, but like using a bulletin board, pin board, notice board to like put up a flyer or business card or anything like that in some kind of community.
I mean, most of our clients are like, big startups with fancy channels, but I do love those pin boards because if you get something that's funny, it works really well. I used to have a business card that was a very obscure picture of a moose with a circle around it. It's a running joke in my family, but it was really fun because I had this picture of the moose and a circle around it, which was like some weird logo. And then I wrote growth marketing, and I would stick this to the community board of a cafe that everyone works in startups. And people would go be like, huh? Yeah, sure. Okay, take a look at it. And that initial curiosity allowed them to sort of, turn it over and start. So unfortunately, not super scalable, but
yeah,
it's fun.
What about TV or radio ads?
I've done them both, struggled to get good ROAS.
Physical coupons or loyalty cards, anything like that?
So I haven't really done that, but one of our clients used to be a loyalty app, actually one of the fastest growing in Europe. In fact, I think it might be the fastest. And what we're finding is that actually having an effective, I mean, this is slightly different and I'm kind of like pitching my client, but having an effective loyalty program has brought back some places from the dead. It's kind of wild. It's been particularly effective for independent places after COVID.
But like, that's the digital version of it. That's what you're saying. Yeah, the digital loyalty programs. All right. Speaking of digital, let's move into the digital marketing side of things. So the updated version, leaving all those old school traditional marketing tactics behind. Oh, I didn't mention one of the big ones in the US at least. Billboards. Like on the side of the road.
Yeah,
do they call them billboards? Oh.
Yep.
Okay.
So we did some billboards next to our road, and we've also done in train stations in London. There's this massive big screen, and we bought out a bunch for one of my clients. And those classic red phone booths we have in the UK, it's very distinctive. We bought all of them in like East London once.
Because they sell ad space on the side of them, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I was really excited about this. It was a massive campaign. We'd done all sorts of crazy stuff, launched it, and we got like 5 downloads. And I was so annoyed. I even told the CEO not to do it before this. We did it because he wanted to. And it's great. You walk along and every time you see your logo, take a picture, because it's like, I did that. But the problem was that we didn't get results. People liked it. People engaged with it. but people weren't even visiting the URL. We had a QR code. We tried everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just because it doesn't work with us doesn't mean it won't work for you, whoever is listening. It just depends on, is this an appropriate channel for my customer?
Right. All right. Moving on to purely digital tactics. You already mentioned you have your own website. Do you blog, like put out content regularly on the website?
Yeah. Not as regularly as I should. Mainly I'm just playing around. Either I have an opinion that I want to share, or we're trying to rank for a specific term.
Cool. And you have a contact form to collect leads on the site?
Yeah.
All right. Social media marketing. For yourself, are you using Facebook ads?
Yeah, we run, well, we only recently just started some outbound marketing for the agency as well. Yeah, and Facebook's doing okay.
Yeah. Okay. YouTube.
So what works really well there, we had a 30-second ad, and then we had a 1 hour webinar that we would then promote. The webinar beat everything else. The webinar was a growth series that I actually created. It was just a free webinar. And I was like, what happens if we use that as the creative? And I mean, you're encouraging people to watch really high. It's a good webinar, even if I do say so myself. And you're using that as the creative, it works.
Okay. So, and in that case, so you ran a shorter video as like an ad and then took them to the webinar. And in the webinar, was there like a call to action to contact you?
We A/B tested the 30-second video, like a short video. And then we also A/B tested the webinar as the creative.
Oh, okay. That's right. Cause you can have really long ads on YouTube, right?
Yeah. Okay. It was just one of those I wonder if that would work. And yeah, it did.
And so there was some kind of call to action in there that would generate a lead for you from the webinar. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. WhatsApp.
Actually, Middle East and Africa does really well. So really interestingly, we worked with a couple of games in Africa, some really interesting fintech, and we use WhatsApp and SMS as a both cold email, cold message approach, and also relationship development.
Okay. Instagram.
Paid or organic?
Either.
We do a lot of paid, and it works well for B2C, the usual stuff.
Right.
Just creative is the most important part. No matter what anyone says, fight me. Organic, we do organic social, but it's mainly just in case customers are curious about what the brand is doing. We don't do it for customer acquisition. We do it for brand maintenance and image.
Okay. TikTok.
Love it. Yeah, doing lots of stuff, lots of e-com. B2B is doing really well. Great CPAs. Who would have thought it? Yeah. Targeting other marketers.
Okay. That makes sense. Facebook Messenger.
We were working with a lead gen. We were working with a fintech company, and we were actually using Facebook Messenger conversations, like the chat functionality, and ManyChat, and that worked really well. So I really like that, and I like that because it's a conversation, and I think that's more natural. That's how people communicate.
Okay, Snapchat
works really well in the Middle East from a modeling agency we're working with.
Really?
I found they got hit the hardest by IDFA tracking from Apple. So harder than Facebook and Instagram, for example, but their data quality definitely out of everyone. We were spending enough that we had enough data on most of the major platforms to be able to accurately say, there's a Snapchat messed up there. I don't know how they were doing attribution from a technical side, but they got it bad.
Wow, you're the first person I've talked to that's actually been using Snapchat.
Really?
That's interesting to hear some data.
Yeah, so we have we had 3 companies over the past year that focused on products that were pertinent and relevant to users on Snapchat. So we had the latest one was a modeling agency, and it was actually just my previous call from this, which is why I'm so excited about it. But they're expanding to Dubai and getting some really good results on Snapchat, which is cool. But I mean, low CPMs. I can't believe people are so happy to like dive headfirst into TikTok and never, because it's cool, it's sexy, and it's the new thing.
Yeah.
And I've never even tried to experiment with Snapchat or other platforms. Like,
Yeah.
they're missing out.
I'm going to have to take another look at it. Telegram.
For a lot of our crypto stuff, we do. A lot
Okay.
of community development messaging.
Pinterest.
Used it on a bunch of different things, achieved mediocre results. I feel like I think that's more just our clients than it is anything, because I feel like there's some real opportunity there. I love everything they push out. They have a great growth blog and like great growth material. In fact, a lot of the senior growth marketing people are like, they produce a lot of content themselves. I know this kind of goes off, direct, how effective is the channel, but the people behind the growth really understand it. And it's great to see that. I think with the right products, because I have friends who worked with it well, it can be incredibly successful, but it's just about having the right product.
That makes sense. Twitter.
So Twitter ads have notoriously performed pretty poorly for me. But I do, depending on the business, I do encourage generally the CEO to actually start just engaging in conversation to develop, to brand awareness, thought leadership, things like that. Or I give it to an intern and to pretend to be the CEO or something.
Just joining conversations with organic content.
Yeah. But it's very time consuming, and it's not very like linear. So I have to be like, CEOs. And there's a lot of CEOs who just don't want to.
Right. Feel like we're paying you to do that stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Reddit.
Typical 80% fails, 20% works really well.
Wow.
We do a lot of like community relationship development. So we work with a lot of brands on Reddit. We have a lot of relationships with subreddit moderators, and we have a lot of accounts, shall we say?
Yeah,
a lot. So depending on the client and the demand, so there's like white hat and ethical ways, and there's less ethical ways. So
gotcha.
The less ethical perform better. Though the ad platform, I believe, is like rapidly improving. We recently did a crypto campaign the end of last year on Reddit, and that worked really well.
What about LinkedIn?
Oh, man, I've yet to see good. LinkedIn ads are the most expensive platform out there. I always struggle to get any good results off them in terms of CPA. Unless you are enterprise, I would probably discourage it. If you're going to use LinkedIn, there's two main ways. First is content. They have the best organic content reach out of pretty much every platform, and people engage a lot on it, so I highly recommend that. The other side of it is, don't waste your money spending £500 on one click for an ad. Spend it on getting LinkedIn Premium, get Wallaxy or an equivalent plugin, and like the effectiveness from a B2B perspective of good, scalable cold messaging on LinkedIn is amazing. Like, I'm always surprised about it. But it's just about how you approach people, how you do that introduction messaging, which sounds so basic, but it's taken me years to get to the point where I am now. And I'm like, we have on average 40% acceptance rate to new profiles.
Whoa.
Like on average 24 point something percent response rate for our messages. The fun fact is, like, in general, I just become less formal, and like the more informal I become, the more they enjoy it. Quora, I really am very addicted to. Produced hundreds of thousands of words. I have yet to see any good responses, any good engagement.
Wow. Because I've heard some people say there's like an SEO benefit of Quora specifically.
Back in the day, I wrote this article. I'll try and find it at some point, and it was very clickbaity. And it was like 100 things you can do to grow your startup, or like 100 things to growth hack your startup, or something. And it hit the front page, and it did really well. and I received tons of traffic, but like none of it converted.
Gotcha.
There's also a lot of ways to manipulate Quora. They have like no safeguards, or like it's so easy. Like back in the day, I don't think this works anymore, and I'm sure someone at Quora sees this, they're gonna have a go at me. But you create a piece of content, you promote, you make it good. Like that's the most important bit. You then get a bunch of people, like real human beings, to promote it. Then you use Amazon MTurk, and you get them to upvote it at different times. And you can hit front page. We were fortunate to hit front page several times before that. Same with Medium.
So you can kind of hack the system real easy. Okay. Discord.
Discord we use a lot with cryptos and communities and a lot of tech SaaS stuff. Community is the holy grail of all marketing, but it is also the most difficult to develop. Because no one is as passionate about you about your business. No one is as passionate about your business as you are.
Right. So you got to find that audience that connects with whatever problem you're trying to solve, like you do in a way, or as close as possible to how you connect with it. Okay. Twitch.
No, we haven't. We tried for a few things, but they don't do crypto. So all of our clients were crypto.
Wow.
That wanted to work with Twitch.
Stack Exchange.
Haven't used it.
All right. What about any of the, it's kind of like TV ads, but like Hulu, I know has been pushing their ad platform a lot, and
haven't used it yet. I'm very curious. Okay. Oh, Amazon ads.
Amazon. Okay. Really?
Beautiful. Worked really, really well. Big fan. I mean, the main four platforms we use, and we actively try to use to try new platforms. Meta is really boring. Google, TikTok. I can't remember the fourth one. And we must have spent over £20 million now. Or wow. I have, like personally, in the past 8 years. Wow. So quite a while. But yeah, it's always the main platforms have the most data, and at the end of the day, they generate the best long-term big results. Sometimes you get lucky. I do think Taboola is a secret underdog. I think if you've got the right right product and right audience, it works really well. But it's difficult to use and difficult to get the right tone and messaging.
And are you actively working on SEO for your agency, like technical SEO, on page, off page, link building?
So earlier I talked about paid acquisition, and that was our bread and butter, and I was a big fan of that. Particularly in the past few years, VCs have just encouraged that. And a lot of our startups have just raised a bunch of money. They come to us and they say, hey, we just told our VC we're going to grow like Uber. What do we do now? And because of that, they have a lot of money in their account and they want to burn it as quickly as possible and get results. So paid is the natural result.
Right.
Now, I always believe I'm a huge fan of paid because it gives you great data and it's very customizable. But as soon as you switch that button off, you have no more value. There is nothing. With SEO, it is an investment. And not only that, but when someone looks at content from an SEO perspective, there's so much more trust and credibility built in. And that, I think, is really undervalued and underappreciated. So I love SEO. I also really love the technical bit of SEO. Ages ago, I mentioned that was my first marketing channel, just learning how to code, where meta keywords were what you ranked for, super easy. But yeah, I did the technical SEOs. I learned that. I still do that myself. I don't do a lot of the technical stuff. We have devs now and things, but I don't know, homage to my beginning of my career. But what I really like about SEO is that you can do so much with it. It's very flexible. I think it's a lot easier than people think it needs to be. We don't actually do link building at all. We just do content generation. We do a lot of fun stuff, a lot of like programmatic SEO. That's really fun. We're playing around with a bunch of trial websites where we're auto generating content and auto making it sound natural and trying to rank them.
Okay.
We've got a few projects on the go and I'm quite excited. We've got one of the fastest growing pilot license websites and some other like niche things.
So you're not afraid of the threats or the warnings from Google about, hey, this is spinning content.
It's funny. We've never ever been hit by an update. There's never one update that's ever hit one of our clients as a result of the work we've done. And my logic, I mean, touch wood, I'm being very, very fortunate by saying that. Eric will see me and he'll be like, I'm coming after you. But at the end of the day, what Google wants is the same thing that we want. We want people to land on our customer's website, for them to find it really valuable, and ideally to take action or purchase from the website. And Google is worried that people are going to use ChatGPT and equivalent tools, and I'm sure Google have a lot more sophisticated tools behind them. And they're going to worry that people are going to use this, replicate content, and the quality of the internet is just going to drop. Now, I think that is definitely the case, but at the end of the day, if people are coming to your website and their problems are being solved, they're not bouncing, they've got a high engagement, they're interacting with your website, it's all good. It's all about the people. It's just these tools just help us do that. I do think one of the big issues with Google and search in general is the quality of search results. Because like in the same way that when we're creating a content brief, one of the things we do is we search the keywords that we're looking for and we see what's ranking for that. Now, that's a very manual approach, but there's tools and systems that do this hundreds of thousands of times a day for people. There's people who do what I do, but at massive, massive scale. Like there's like one guy in Nevada who sends 80% of all spam. I know him. He helps me when I get like issues with my ESP. Really lovely guy. But if you go check your junk right now, most of that junk will be his stuff, and he makes so much money, man. So much money. And the weird thing is, he's a nice guy. Like you chat to me, he's so happy to jump on a call with you as well. I mean, I won't. I'm not going to share more, but like, every time you think you're doing something well, you then discover there's like an absolute don in it somewhere else. But yeah, SEO worked really well. Just focus on the human being. Like, when people think, how do I optimize my website for SEO? I think to myself, how are you optimizing your website for your customer? Do that. And then people are like, oh, how do I do that? And then I'm like, exclude marketing. Think about it as a human being. Like when you're visiting this website, what do you want to find? Like, what are the questions, if it was a person, you would ask? What order are those questions? How comprehensive are those questions? Yeah. Think about it like human.
Well, that seems to be the running theme. Solve human problems and you'll get good results. This has been awesome, man. You've shared a ton of gold with us, a lot of insights. Why don't we wrap up by you maybe speaking directly to your target audience, describing your service and kind of giving a little 1-paragraph pitch as though that target audience was listening right now.
Sure. Well, first of all, I also want to say thank you for this opportunity. I've enjoyed, I love talking about growth and marketing, and I hope I don't come across as too cynical, but I am quite passionate about it. I'm very fortunate to do what I do. I'm very bad at pitching myself, I guess, because we don't really pitch that much. But what I would say is, if you're unsure, if you know where you want to go, but you're unsure of how you want to get there, and you're like a Series A, Series B, app SaaS, e-com crypto company, then have a chat with me and let's see if I can help. If not, I will probably be able to give you some advice. Either way, I'm not going to hard sell anyone. So if that sounds interesting, then feel free to get in touch at We Scale Startups. I love chatting growth, so always happy to help. And I hope this podcast is helpful to your listeners. I think I was a bit too open with some things, but it's brought back a lot of cool memories of like experiments and experiences.
It's been great, man. I appreciate you sharing everything you shared with us. I think that's it. That's a great show. We'll see everybody next time.
Sounds good. Cheers.
Stop recording here.